Hello everyone, welcome to EMD Media. EMD Media works on understanding, measuring, and doing. And it focuses on everything that's related to the Horn of Africa, and specifically Ethiopia, and more specifically on Tigray. It strives to contribute for an evidence-rich and evidence-led discourse and decision-making. We are live on YouTube and Facebook right now. Please share, subscribe, like, so that YouTube algorithms can share to more people the material we'll be talking about today. Stay tuned with me. I should firsthand warn every audience or people who are listening, tuning in on Facebook and YouTube. The stories we'll be talking about today are really disturbing, and graphic language, graphic presentations could be part of the show. So please warn that this is a very graphic content of disturbing stories of women and girls victimized in mass rapes, gang rapes in Tigray since November 4. My guest to talk about this is Meskel Mariam, who has been recording the stories of these women and girls in Tigray. And this is not over yet in Western Tigray. Still, there is mass rape and gang rape happening under different circumstances on girls as age as very young ones and old women. Gabra Maskal, I'm delighted to have you here on this show. Of course, we'll be talking about not delightful stuff, but thank you for taking time to come to UMD Media. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Nick, for having me. Thank you.
Great. So let's talk about, people who have been following the stories of this gang rape, mass rape, and in Tigray know you must say a very, very tough job. But for those who never heard of you or didn't see you before, I would like to introduce you to the audience. So the topic we are talking about a follower of him not survive for psychological and physical reasons as well. So we kept it the way it is: rape victims and Tigray genocide, chronicling disturbing stories. You are the one who has been recording, chronicling to the extent you can. So you can follow Gabra Mariam on LinkedIn. He is a research engineer and doing his master's until he had to stop it for the reason that he wanted to focus on recording, documenting, and communicating the sad stories of the sorrowful stories of women and girls in Tigray. And this is his Twitter account, personal Twitter account on Twitter. And you can see a reference to a website of his activism. and there are a number of social Meskel Mariam. This is his Facebook page, and this is a website of his activism or recording and advocating for women and girls in Tigray rape victims.org. And he's everywhere, or the activism work is on Instagram, victims that they are, and on the women, that is the handle access on Facebook. So again, another summit where healing rather based on sources on ground, all of the media has been bombed by airstrike. We are unfortunately having a technical issue. I think we are back now. Let's see how this goes. Okay, so we are witnessing, we are hearing these airstrikes. So I'm just wondering, were you old enough to talk about airstrikes in Tigray when you were a junta before Gabra Meskel?
Get, will you come again? I think the network is very intermittent. It's cutting, so I didn't hear what you said.
Okay, can you hear me clearly now?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, I was talking about were you old enough to witness any airstrike, jet bombardment in Tigray when you were a kid?
Actually, I was not. I can't remember, but I actually remember when my grandmother, once upon a time, she put me on her back, and she was running out of my hometown to. There was a very big cave nearby our hometown, where the people, the residents, would hide under. So when there was the very disturbing noise of the jet coming closer, so my grandma put me on her back, so she was rushing to that cave. This is still, very. Of course, I remember this event. Apart from that, I don't remember any airstrike. I was very young, or maybe I was very small boy, so I don't remember exactly
Mm.
every detail.
Yeah, it's for me. It's the very fact that Abiy Ahmed chose a market day, which is today in Maqala, the day to strike through air bombardment shows me that he was looking for a maximum effect. And this is not the first time Magala was bombed on a market day. Actually, during the war from November 4 onwards, Togoga was bombed on a market day as well. I think housing was also bombarded on a market day. And Magala itself, under Haile Selassie, using the British Airways 77 days ago, 7 years ago, was hit on a market day as well. So it's with this background story of still an active civilian victims. We are talking about today's victims that has been running for the last 11 months and counting. So first off, how come what took you to that journey? There are a number of victims in this war, and what was it for you to select the rape victims and advocating for them, trying to get against all odds, against all difficulties, to hear their stories and document it? What was it like for you?
Uh, as every Tigrayan, after the war was launched on November 4, almost a year ago, by default, everyone was just, busy on Twitter 24/7. No sleep, nothing at all. Every Tigran was wherever they are across the world was, tweeting nonstop. That was actually my um, immediate reaction. And Tigray was completely dark. It has been under complete communications blackout, so we didn't had the privilege to know what was actually going on. So the focus of of course, every Tigrayan was toward Western Tigray. Those Tigrayans who were fleeing to Sudan. That was, you know, the only option that we were left with. So uh, the man whose name is Abraha, if I'm not mistaken, from my cadre, whose wife died while laboring to give birth to twin in the deserts of Maikara. His story was shared on Facebook. There was a Sudanese mobile number in that Facebook, so I tried that number. It worked, and we had a brief conversation with Abraha, and I remember it lasted for 9 minutes, and it was a live conversation on Facebook, so it was shared by many people. From that moment on, my focus was uh, on the Western Tigray, and specifically in the refugee camps inside Sudan, and more importantly, my focus was also confined to a public hospital in Gaddafi. So many refugees who were sick had been referred to that hospital, and they were languishing to death under very uh, under a dire situation in the hospital. So I was, for some reason, attracted to that hospital, and later on, these rumors came and went viral on social media that the Amhara Fano they are vowing to rape as many Tigrayan girls and women as possible, and of course, those HIV positive, and they were vowing to infect as many Tigrayan women and as possible. That were going viral, and I was kind of, wait a minute, this will never happen. This is just rumor. That was my immediate reaction. And if you ask me why, because I assumed the society is very godly, very religious, and regardless of what bloodiest war we are in, they wouldn't lower themselves to this level. That was my assumption. They are God fearing, okay, so they will not, inflict such kind of horror on our mothers and sisters. Unfortunately, they proved me wrong. So, in towards the end of January, BBC came up with a news about Mona Lisa, and within some days, the Los Angeles Times, I remember it was February 11, released a very, very graphic story about a girl, a woman, a young woman, Marhawid. The name, according to the media, is Marhawid. So these two stories, especially that of Marhawid, was very, very, horrendous, and it was too much for me to take. And it took me hours to complete the story. I had to stop and breathe and start again, read. It took me many hours to finish. That helped me to visualize the degree of um, agony that our mothers and sisters were under. That kind of was a glimpse of light to me to see the day-to-day livelihood of the mothers under these merciless savages. So I was touched internally, and I decided to dedicate some time to bring their story, their agony into the attention of the international community. I thought it was not enough. Uh, of course, Omana and Aisan Wisigrai had this campaigns dedicated for these victims, but I thought that was not enough, and I felt there has to be a dedicated campaign, stand alone, non-stop, consistent campaign dedicated to the mothers of Tigray. So with this idea, I talked to Tigrayan ladies in my circle. So they were very happy. So we discussed and discussed. We had actually repeated meetings over Zoom. So, it morphed into a very organized and shaped campaign. So we finally agreed that it has to be uh, mainly led by women. And of course, I proposed a structure where there will be chairwoman, vice, finance head, social media head, public relations head, data repository head, eight responsible ladies. So yeah, that was structured that way, and one of the ladies was tasked with designing a website. So we deliberately decided this to be a cause mainly spearheaded by women, and of course, from the back, men of the grand origin or anyone who would be interested can be there and give support. That was the intention, the plan, but practically it turned out to be, very challenging. So yeah, I decided to dedicate my whole time to the movement, regardless of what might happen, whether the other ladies would contribute or not. I had just decided to spend my whole time on this campaign. Of course, as you see, this very beautiful logo was designed by one of our grants in Italy, Araya, and that idea was given to him by our sister Meskel from Milano. So this logo concept was developed by her. We have to have a logo, and yeah, then we came up with this the wording, what word should appear on the logo, and of course this very beautiful woman representing the Tigrayan girls, and that the under the logo there is this, blue, white blue or light blue symbol, and we agreed on the color. So yeah, there was
Mm,
very repeated discussion, and yeah, so I would like to underline that it is not only me who has been involved in this campaign. Many people have been involved and contributed to this final strong campaign. So that's how it all started in
mm,
February.
mm. Yeah, Gaur Meskel, thank you very much. And so far, you have been talking to, as much as possible to a primary source, listening their stories in different ways. And we know for a fact that since November 4th, the first thing that the Abiy government did was a complete blockade of communication. And you rightly discussed and presented how the Western, people who were fleeing Tigray to Sudan were the first sources. Then there was a time where Abiy controlled the major towns and cities in Tigray, and at least there was some open up even to journalists, all that, and so on. Then we are back to a full fledged blockade, communication, transport, humanitarian, economic, financial, all that. So, what does it look like to work under these circumstances in terms of getting the stories out, um, talking to them? What does it look like for you and for your team, whoever is working together? Uh, what was, in practical terms, uh, going on in getting the stories out? How do you do that?
That's very tough question, and of course the answer is obvious. So back then when we sat for a discussion, just brainstorming ourselves as to how we would gather information, how we would collect the data. So our main purpose was to bring those who are living with the pain to health centers. That was our primary focus, not to concentrate on those who were staying under these safe houses, not frankly speaking about them. Our very, very much concern was about the almost more than 98% of those who were still staying under the darkness with the agony, with the physical and mental trauma. So that was our headache. How would we be able to bring them to health centers? So we're brainstorming ourselves. So what if we just collect money and send and give to those who are already at the safe house, so that those who are in the remote areas would get the motivation, so that they are getting money, so let's go there and we'll also get money. Yeah, we're very, very much concerned as how we would be able to, you know, to get to them. That we're lucky enough to find people in different towns and IDP centers who were very, very much selfless and would help us to get us connected with victims and finding victims and putting us on the phone with them. Of course, under this communication blackout, that was very challenging. That's why that it was uh, very much affected by the communications blackout imposed by Abiy Ahmed Ali. So we're only able to communicate with the victims on that short period of on that short window. Uh, of course, the telecom service was very, intermittent. It was being cut, and of course, it was sometimes released, so it was not consistent. So we had to just depend on that. When there is network service, would call, and when there is no, we wouldn't do anything. So yeah, it has affected us very much, to the degree of even now we don't know the status of those women and girls with whom we had a continuous communication, and whom who we were able to help financially, of course. So yeah, it has hindered our overall operations in Tigray as far as the weaponized victims is concerned. And that is not only challenge that we faced. Of course, there are dozens of challenges, but with regard to the communications blackout, it is the toughest obstacle that we faced so far, and I don't know when this will be lifted. So yeah, it has affected us very, very much, extremely, very much. So yeah, it even we managed to get some good Samaritans who would send monthly financial support on a dedicated permanent basis to assign victims on a monthly basis, just like a family. But now that is completely shattered. We don't know the status of those victims, and those people who were sending money on a monthly basis have no chance of sending money because there is no channel. The communication is broken. The banking service is broken. Nothing at all. So yeah, it has affected us enormously.
Hmm. Yeah, that's what is unique about this whole government, all forces that are collaborating with Abiy Ahmed. Uh, what they did successfully, this siege on Tigray. It's a multiple blockades. You are talking about now the financial blockade and the economic blockade. Even the well-to-dos cannot access to their financial resources. They cannot access their banking services, and therefore are under the same siege. And the victims who need support, medical, humanitarian, every kind of support, psychological, are again under the same siege by Abiy Ahmed, under the watch of the international community. One thing that I noticed in your reporting when telling the story of the victims, uh, you use English names. I remember Paula, I remember Christine, all that. And this is unlike the practice or the what the international media, the journalists do. They do also try to cover to protect the victims, but they use another Tigrinya name, and you saw a problem in that, and you try to mitigate that your own way. Can you speak to that aspect?
That's very interesting, actually, and very important. Yeah. So as I was reading reports over reports, and of course, uh, these news outlets covering about the weaponized rape, they would often use very typical, very common Tigrinya names. Very common. Samrawit, Marhawit, yeah, just like that. Hadas, Berlin, National, etc. Very common, and names which are shared by thousands of girls and women, and that was very concerning to me. I was very much concerned. I was shocked because there's social stigma, and of course, every corner of Tigray was overwhelmingly occupied by these, savages, and they were vowing to kill them, to torture them if they utter a single word. as they were gang raping them, they continuously threaten them that they should keep quiet. They should never tell about what happened to them. They should never share their story to whomever it, they might be. So, under this situation, to use a very familiar Tigrayan name, it does never mind whether you have father's name or not. Thus, media claim that they removed the father's name by putting an asterisk, but that is not enough. At least the first name is there. So, for example, this, the soldiers, if they raped, for example, a lady with some specific name, let's say Hadas, then if the name Hadas is available in the media, okay, if for example, if they change it to Sahaitu in the media reporting, so imagine now.
mm,
So there might be another Sahaitu who was raped at the other corner of Tigray.
mm,
So, Sahaitu, I told her not to tell to anyone. Now she reports to the media. So whoever has the name Sahaitu would be exposed.
to more savage. Yeah.
Yeah, they might kill her. We warned you not to share, not to tell your story. Now you disobeyed us. You didn't respect my word. Then yeah, you pay the price. So they're not safe anymore. That was not convincing to me. So this I came up with that idea actually popped out my mind. What if I use these Ferengi names? So yeah, Christine Paula. No one will find any Paula or any Christian in Tigray. So yeah, that's fine then. Of course, the main cause of disguising
Mm,
the victims in someone else's name is meant to be to to protect them, not to expose them. And of course, there is social stigma as well. Why would some lady with the name Hadas, who was not raped, would be considered as stigmatized because
mm,
her name was used to cover another girl's you know situation? Why would any lady with the name Marhawit be stigmatized only because the name Marhawit was used in the media to report about weaponized rape? Why? So yeah, that's it was with this um, concern that I decided to use non-Tigrayan names. So that's the reason.
it's uh, it's unfortunately having we're facing a lot of technical difficulties. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can hear you. Yes.
Yeah. If and when it happens, continue unless you are done with your response. You will continue on that. So I think this is a very critical. Some might consider it's a minor issue, but it's a major social problem that has a double damage in terms of, like you said, stigmatization, but also protection. So I think journalists who are reporting on Tigray and elsewhere, in the region, they should pay attention to what the implication of just using the blanket solution or common solutions that they usually use elsewhere will not work. Actually, they might be even to the contrary, like you are mentioning. So I'm so happy that you were at least able to devise some mechanism to protect yourself. to we know a number of people, a number of reporting that have been done on the rape victims, some of them by very known, impactful media, and some by human rights organizations, all that. So, what are you hoping would achieve in terms of working on this? I know at any person from Tigray, you have your own personal and family issues in terms of you haven't been in communication with your wife for the how many weeks and months now, God knows, and you also have been facing the difficulty of understanding how your fellow church mates, if that's a word, people who used to go with you and serving in the church, how genocidal they became, all that. So there is a lot of personal burden you are shouldering, I understand. So what are you hoping to listening and telling the stories of these women that at times even talk about praying for the culprits, for the savage, all that. And so how are you handling, how are you hoping this would bring something positive to the victims?
Uh, if I capture your question very well, because it's I think the network is cutting.
Mm.
So I think your question is how I am hoping this would help the victims, right?
Yeah, right, yeah,
Yeah,
that's the essence of the question, yeah.
yeah, yeah. Though, so basically, this campaign has this objective of course, these three objectives, and the first and the foremost is to reach out to those forgotten victims. Tens of thousands of them were destined to stay behind their doors, excluded from the rest of the world under the shadows of this communications blackout, under an active genocidal campaign by the 2019 Nobel Peace Laureate. So, yeah, and under the situation where almost 80, 90% of the health center of Tigray has been destroyed, intentionally destroyed. So you can imagine in such situation where there is no nearby health facility, where there is no transportation, where there is no a brother or a father who would take her to that remote area where there might be a functioning health center, because any male was targeted on the spot. So, and also the social stigma against all disorders. How can a victim get medical help? That was the main concern. So we have to do something to help them get medical access. So we need to campaign to do something. That was the very uh, core of this movement. And the second point was to tell to the world that this is happening to the Tigrayan mothers and sisters, and the world should not forget these voices. We have to keep these voices high on a daily basis for as long time it might take. As far as there is no positive action, we need to keep our voices high. We need to bring the voices of these silenced voices to the world, to the attention of the international community. So yeah, that's the second point, and the third point is to document this story, because that was the the serious the serious weakness of us at Tigrayan people. We don't document our story. We have very, I don't know how to say that, a chronic disease, I would say. A chronic disease that we don't document our own story. Whether it is bad or good, it doesn't matter, as long as we didn't did these bad deeds, we fail to document. So that was that was the reason why we came up with the decision that there has to be standalone website, and the website should be designed by women, yourselves. Then that would be a repository where, any researcher or any Tigrayan generation in the future would go to that site and read the stories of his mothers and his sisters and his grandmothers as well. So the story should be recorded, should be well documented, and every single woman or girl's story. I'm saying, I'm referring everyone to the victims, every one of them, their story should be well documented, well recorded. If there are 50,000 personal stories should be documented, recorded, and available at one center, uh, one repository. Of course, we can use names just like we've been discussing earlier on. We can use that kind of names and put the story. We want the agony to be presented the way it was committed by these perpetrators. So this was the third reason. So in these three reasons, or in these three objectives, that's one way, contributing to the story or to the lives of the victims, to keep their voices being heard by the world, to keep their stories to be documented, well documented, and more than anything, to help them get medical access and to help them recover from the misfortunes that they have been put through. So yeah, these are the three ways that these victims can be helped with, I think.
Mm, mm. Thank you so much, Gabra Meskel. I'm just wondering, do we have any? I mean, from time to time, we saw a number of, figures thrown out on the total number of victims that. I mean, we know it's not stopped yet. Like I said, Western Tigray is under still the savage forces. And I saw a number that I can share now. For example, this is back then. It's in the British Parliament. They talk about, it has been estimated that 10,000 from Channel 4. So Channel 4, BBC, and the CNN, they talk about documented the horrific nature of these attacks, including kidnapping, imprisonment, rape, and mutilation. So, I mean, the person who have been these victims report.
Uh, I think the network is very, very much constraining the session. So if I got your question, I think you're asking me if I have the recent figure with regard to the number of the victims, if I captured your question very well. So yeah, many news outlets have been reporting varying figures, and as you said, as it displayed on the screen, the BBC reported about estimated the victims at 10,000. Other news outlets estimate it at a different number, uh, and the UNFPA estimated it at 26,000 plus, of course, 26,000 and some hundreds. That was the recent or the most recent estimate by UNFPA. I think this is from July, if I'm not mistaken. But that is not the number that can represent the victims. So in April, on April 13, the UNFPA released a report about health professionals that are needed to deal with this, with this uh, weaponized rape in Tigray. So the UNFPA in that report in April, in the second week of April, mentioned that 52,500 victims of weaponized rape in Tigray. That is in April. 52,500 in April. So over the days, news outlets, they have released it, they have used, varying figures, but I am, I'm left uh, focused on that number, and of course, it would be even way higher than 52,000, and I have reason why I am claiming so. If I'm asked, I can explain why. Because at every village, at every town, at every city that those barbaric uh, aggressors, set their foot on or their feet in, they were targeting the women and the girls and killing the males. So they have this tactic. They would kill the males, they would rape the females regardless of what age they are, and they would ransack the property. So these were these biblical guidelines for the invading forces. So this being said, now how many months have they stayed throughout Tigray? From November up until June across Tigray, and from November up until now in Western Tigray, as well as uh, eastern tip of Tigray in Europe, and areas in the bottom area, and so on. So how many mothers, sisters, girls, women in general might have been raped? We can imagine if the UNFPA released the figure to be 52,500 in April, then now we can imagine how worse it actually might be on the ground. Of course, taking into consideration the the motive that those perpetrators were committing those crimes with. They were telling them, "Oh, you Tigrayans are useless. Oh, you are dirty. You are trash. Oh, we are here to, you know, to destroy your reproductive organs. Oh, we are here to infect you with HIV, with STIs. Yeah, we are here to make you, give birth to our own babies." ethnic Amharas and the Eritreans as well. We are here to destroy the entire Tigrayan ethnicity. We would like to destroy your womb so that you would not produce a junta, a wayana. So these were the motives behind the very crime. So if this is the motive behind, then in every village, that motive would not change. Every time they see a woman, that motive is in their mind to destroy the reproductive organ of every Tigrayan woman or girl so that they wouldn't be able to give birth to the future generation of Tigray. So that's why we say from the top, it is a systemic, well organized, well architectured crime. And at the top, we have Abiy Ahmed and, of course, Isaias Afwerki, engineering such an industrial scale rape on the entire Tigrayan population. So the number, coming to your question, the number is way, way,
Mm.
way behind, beyond. And 10,000 BBC. And as I said, you might have not heard me saying the recent by UNFPA was UNFPA Ethiopia branch 26,000 plus. But the international organization UNFPA, the main headquarter, released, a statement in April, and the figure was 50,500. So I would rather take that number than this 10,000 or the 26,000. Of course, that 50,000 even is less for me because due to these obvious reasons that I have explained earlier on.
Mm. But hide the personal, painful, agonizing stories of these women who have families, parents, depending on their age, families, kids, all that, and so on. So, can you? I know it's very traumatizing to replay their stories that you have heard, you have read, you have written about, you have been communicating in different platforms. The platforms I showed. On top of that, you are active on Clubhouse as well, sharing this story. So if it's not too much to ask, would you be able to share with us the personal stories of, as examples of this, like you said, over hundred, I mean, tens of thousands of, let's put it that way, women. So, Gabram Skal, is it okay if you take whichever story you have heard? We make the point.
Okay,
Were you able to hear my
I
question?
think uh, your connection, is it my connection or your connection? I don't know. Either one
Again, I
has
apologize.
connection is disturbing.
I'm speaking to
So
yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to stop. Yeah. So it was my question. Can you share? I mean, we talk about tens of thousands of victims, and it's not stopped yet. But you heard enough. So can you share with us some?
I think I understood you. You're asking me to share some stories of the victims with whom I have been on the phone. Yeah, so I begin. So let me go to Western Tigray, then I will go all the way to Northwestern, the Central Tigray, Eastern Tigray, then Southern Tigray, like that. So, beginning from the Western Tigray, um,
And let's
can you hear
hope
me?
you'll be
Get, can you
back,
hear me?
and we continue with our victims disturbing stories that he has been documenting. And as we speak today, Maqala, Monday, that's Monday, October 18th, is bombed by Abiy Ahmed Air Force, and 11 victims are reported. Sources on the ground, as we're talking about victims and having difficulty with the network.
I think the Kaito has got some problem. So it would be better to continue, I think, to to use our time. So let me begin with the Western Tigray. Uh, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I'm so sorry. You can continue with the story that you can share with us, please. Gabram Meskel, can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, I'll continue. So I think your question was to share the stories of those women or girls with whom I was on the phone. I think, right? Okay. So yeah, um, let me begin from the Western Tigray, then
Yes.
Northwestern, Central, Eastern, Southern. I will go that way. So from the Western Tigray, uh, one of the most painful, of course, everyone's story is very painful. It's extremely painful. I'm not ranking their pain or their agony. I'll never do that. But the most barbaric one, I will begin with that. So, this woman is a mother of three. She is in her uh, early 30s. So, she has 2 years old baby on her back and 4 years old and 9 years old baby boys to the left and right hand. Uh, so she was fleeing from Maikadra. She was a resident of Maikadra, and she was fleeing. And of course, there were hundreds of them. There was a Sinotrack, and they had to pay lots of money. So they arrived on the river banks of the Takaza River. So when the Sino dropped them on the banks of the Takaza, they heard that the Amhara Fano had been massacring civilians, so they had to run from the spot. So as they were running, this mother couldn't cope up with the other people because she was carrying a baby on her back and she had two boys under 10 years old, so she left behind. So there were four guys, four young Tigranes who were, escaping, and from a distance they saw behind them a mother carrying her baby and two under 10 years old boys. And of course, there were two other women with her. So this woman couldn't run as fast as they were expected. So those four young Tigrans had to go back to help this helpless mother. So the time they arrived back, Eritrean troops came from nowhere and surrounded them, pointing their guns on them, on these four young Tigran, young Tigran males, and of course these three Tigran women. Seven of them. There are two under 10 years old, and of course there is the baby. So this gang of Eritrean soldiers, they separated the four youngsters, so they shot them in front of these three helpless women. They are the boys are watching as those four young Tigrayan males were gang shot. So after that, they took them to a neighborhood where the houses were empty. When I say empty, the owners were not there. The goats, the livestock, everything was there, but the owners were not there because they fled from the area to save themselves. Then these Eritrean soldiers started torturing these three helpless women to speak about the whereabouts of their fathers, brothers, husbands, and so on. After torturing them, they started, of course, they divided them among groups and started gang raping them. It was on the 28th of December or 19th of December in Ge'ez calendar. So they started gang raping them at 5 p.m. in the afternoon. Throughout the night, they kept gang raping them until 10 a.m. the next morning, which was on the 29th of December. For 17 hours non-stop, period of 17 hours non-stop, they kept gang raping them. So this woman was gang raped by 5 soldiers. The second one was likewise gang raped by other 5. And the third one was unfortunately, liar, because she lied that the husbands of these two women are Tigrayan special forces. As they were torturing them, she told secret which she was supposed not to tell. To save herself, she exposed this other helpless woman. So she said she is HIV positive after she helped them, that the husbands of those two are Tigrayan special forces. So the Eritrean soldiers did a favor for her. They spared her and they gang raped the other two. As if the gang rape was not enough, at 10 a.m. on the 29th of December, the Eritrean soldiers, they heated a metallic rod and burned genitalia, the genitals of these two helpless victims. So after burning their genitals, this mother of three was also exposed to layer 3 barbarity, and that was they collected pieces of metallic wires they had with them. I am very, very, no, mind boggled. Why would they keep wires with them? That's something to be, I don't know, to be researched. Anyway, they inserted the wires into her womb, then they abandoned them in the middle of the desert. After many hours, these two women regained their consciousness. They were unconscious for many hours. Imagine this helpless baby is crying for breastfeed, but the mother is, you know, inside kind of suffering. After both of them regain their consciousness, there was no one, but only the under 10 years old uh, boys. Luckily, there were Tigranes fleeing from the western part of Tigray toward Shira. They came across that area. They found them lying on the ground. They carried them all the way, crossing the Takaza, and then finally to Shira. At Shira, they were admitted to an IDP center, but still the mother was planning to commit suicide because she thought she, she didn't deserve to live. She thought her life was over. She thought she was just a burden to the earth. She thought she was useless. She thought no one needs her. And her life was, her life ended. That was the thought in her. She was extremely traumatized, so she was planning to commit suicide. But before committing a suicide, she planned to hand over her kids to anyone who would take care of them, and she believed it would be the Red Cross. So as she was searching for the Red Cross at Shira, she met a Frangi member of the Red Cross. So there was a very kind lady in Shira who helped me get connected with many victims on the phone. So she explained the case of that woman to the Frangi. So the Frangi was shocked. She took her to the hospital. She was admitted to the hospital. Then at the hospital, yeah, she started medication. And after 3 months, it was found out that there was metal inside her. So doctors undertook a surgery, so they had to remove it surgically, and they found 5 metallic wires in her womb and removed them by surgery. She's almost paralyzed. She can't breastfeed her baby, and those 2 children, they are with her in the hospital. There is no one. Of course, there were very good Samaritans in the town in Shira. Apart from that, her family, her husband, no one was there to help that to help her. So yeah, this is one of the most graphic story that I heard directly from a victim, and this I think will remain with me forever, for as long as I am alive. I will never forget this. I can't forget her name. And on top of this, imagine they tortured her, gang raped her, burned her genitalia. They inserted metallic wires into her womb, and degree 5, as she was staying in the hospital bed, they were coming. Both the Eritreans and the Ethiopian soldiers would come every day to the hospital and vow to kill them if they utter a single word. They knew the rooms where these victims of weaponized rape were staying, so they would come every day. There was no one to say, no, you can't enter. Of course, they would kill you if you challenge them. So the hospital was exposed. I was shocked to know this. I had the privilege of talking to the medical manager of Sheriff Hospital. He was traumatized. he wouldn't dare to share a single data with me on the phone. We just speak, we are just okay, we're fine, blah, 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 blah. And when I try to challenge him, please, can you tell me about the rape survivors? We'll talk later on, please. I can't now. The environment is not safe. And she told me every day those soldiers would come, but they know from distance as the soldiers would be coming from the entrance, those victims are always very wary of the environment. So when they see them entering from a distance, they would run to the bushes. Luckily, there is a very there is a frost from the back side of the hospital. So these victims would leave their beds and would enter to the bushes to avoid seeing this barbaric force of evil. So that's the fifth level of crime. This
mm,
much crime on a single woman, helpless woman.
mm,
So
mm,
this can say all. This can summarize every pain that the other victims has gone through. This single woman is just a representation of the Tigrayan mothers. She had endured every single, every kind of, suffering or agony that you might imagine. And this is the kind of victim that Abiy Ahmed, this fascist and genocidal Abiy Ahmed, is now cutting the telecom service so that this kind of victim would never get medical help, would never get financial aid to help her baby, to help her two children, because there is no one to help her. Everyone is impoverished in the Tigrayan towns, cities, villages, because we know they have been ransacked. This is one of the most graphic. And imagine the other girl, as the other woman as well, was burned. She was gang raped, tortured, of course, gang raped, then burned. They didn't insert wires, but still, this torture was there. She left to Magala, but she told me that she saw her on TV. Yeah, the safe house in Magala, we have, very, very graphic testimonies about where the safe house as well, because the soldiers were going and forcefully entering to the safe house and searching. I don't know what they were searching for, but they would enter, they would take stuff from the safe houses against the guideline of the safe house that any man can never enter to a safe house. Anyone beyond 4 years old, any male beyond 4 years old can never enter to safe house. That's the guideline, the binding guideline of safe house. But the soldiers were forcefully entering safe house as the center of Magala. Imagine. So they were torturing
mm,
them. So this
mm,
kept happening. Yeah, it's too much to explain about every one of them. And before I leave Western Tigray, another one from Dansha, as she was fleeing with her mom and father, crossing the Takaza bridge, linking Dansha through Dadabi to Shira. Once they arrived at Dadabi was still peaceful. The savages, the Eritrean soldiers uh, hadn't arrived there. So as they were hosted there in the grand household at the town, the Eritreans started shelling Dadabit from a distance. As the shelling was continuing, the household fled to the villages, and these displaced Tigranes from Western Tigray, from Dansha, fled to the villages as well. After 3 days, the the mother and her daughter, the daughter 24 years old, had a baby. She was breastfeeding. So they returned back to the town to collect, pieces of clothes for the baby. As they arrived at the household where they were, you know, sheltered at, they found Eritrean soldiers there. They had already occupied the town. They didn't know the occupation of the town. They just returned, but oh, now the shelling is over. Let's get back and bring a piece of clothes to this baby. When they arrived, they found the Eritrean soldiers, and they challenged them. Where have you been? Yeah, we staying in the village. Why did you flee to the village? We just were very, very horrified by the shelling, so we left to save ourselves. And the Eritreans said, "Are we beasts that you are afraid of us? Why would you get, afraid of us? Are we beasts?" And the woman replied, the mother and the daughter, "No, you are not beasts, but we're afraid as the shelling was, taking place." So the soldiers started torturing the daughter and the mother. So they raped the daughter in front of the mother. They removed the baby from the back of the daughter, handed over to the grandmother, and the grandmother had to stand carrying her grandchild as her daughter was gang raped by the Eritrean soldiers in front of her. After hours, they dumped them there. They left. Then the mother and the daughter, they returned back to the village. So the daughter warned her mom never to utter a single word, never to tell to her dad, never to tell anybody. She begged her mom. So they stayed in the village for 3 months without any medical help. Imagine. After 3 months, they arrived at Shire, an IDP center, and as IDP, one of my contact persons in Shire knew about this story. It took her days to convince this victim to be taken to a private clinic. This victim didn't want her story to be known by anyone, including her dad. And when I asked her, why did you fail to say yes to the clinic? And she replied, I didn't want my dad to know. Why? I asked. And she replied, my dad is in his 70s. So if he knows that I got raped by the Israeli soldiers, he would go to the deserts and join the armed struggle. I don't want my dad in his 70s to go to the armed struggle. For the sake of saving my dad, I kept the pain to myself. That's why I didn't want to go to a clinic. That was her response. And okay, to shorten the story, finally she was taken to a clinic, and she got every necessary medical help. Then after, she was very glad, frankly speaking, very glad. She found out that she was free of any sexual transmitted infections. She was free of HIV. Imagine, she spent more than 3 months in the village after the gang rape. So for an HIV test, it was, possible, and the result could be easily known after 3 months. So she was free of any sexual transmitted diseases and free of pregnancy. She had only some infection of the tube, urinary tube. That was all. So she was very happy that she was free, as if the gang rape was less painful. She forgot it, and she was happy that she found out that her health was, you know, okay. She was free of any STIs. And I asked her, now, are you okay to tell your dad that to share your story. Now I can't tell him now. Now I can't tell him. Now I started living. I can breathe fresh air. That was her reaction. She was very glad for being taken to a clinic. So that I felt how many more tens of thousands of the same victims might say the same thing that she was saying, might say that they started living once again after visiting a health center. That was the idea that continuously kept popping up in my mind. At the beginning, she was challenging, she was refusing not to be taken to health center, and finally, her response was very positive and very powerful and very, very empowering. So that final expression coming out of her mouth is the same expression that I would love to come out of every one of these tens of thousands of victims across the Tigray. But still, they need someone to encourage them to visit medical center, health center, medical help, psychological therapy. They need, every kind of treatment, but they need someone to encourage them to say, it's okay, let me take you. So let me finalize Western Tigray with these two cases. And there is some girl who was intentionally infected by the Amhara Fano. She and other 5 girls were fleeing from Humora. As they were fleeing, the Amhara Fano captured them, 6 of them, in the middle of the desert before they crossed the Takaza river, and then they kept gang raping them for days. After 3 days of no food, no water, but torture and gang rape, this lady lost her consciousness. So on the 4th day, when she woke up, she found out that she was dumped in the middle of a desert. There was no one, no girl, no man, no one at all, in the middle of the desert. And I asked her, what do you think happened to the other 5 girls? And she replied, I don't know. I don't know. I just, woke up and there was no one next to me. I couldn't remember where they were taken to because I lost myself. I was unconscious. She was very lucky. Tigranes who were fleeing from the western Tigray found her lying on the desert. They carried her all the way up to Shararo. So after Shararo, they found transportation, and then from town to town, finally Shira. When they arrived at Shira, admitted to an IDP. Then in the IDP, this my contact person, who is originally from Shiraz, she found out about this girl, and she asked her to help her visit a medical center, and that lady was very willing. So she took her to the medical center, of course, her hospital, and found out that she was 5 months. She had 5 months old pregnancy. The pregnancy was not the only concern. Okay, the pregnancy was aborted, that's fine. But also she was tested to be HIV positive, and that HIV infection is an intentional infection from the Amhara Fano to the Tigrayan girls, so that they would crush the future generation of the Tigrayan people. That's very difficult to explain her agony in words. She keeps weeping, crying, crying. We managed that our contact person managed to find a rented house so that she would be treated in isolation, and we managed to find a very good Samaritan from Tigran, of course, who lives in Italy. She promised to permanently, on a monthly basis, to help her financially. That was the way up until Ahmed Ali, the fascist, cut off the communication and the bank service in Tigray. Coming to northwestern Tigray, this is a mother of three. She is originally from Shararo town. So as the Eritreans, the Ethiopian soldiers, the aggressors were entering to Shararo on the first week of November, those women and of course everyone in Shararo was fleeing to the to the remote areas. There was shelling. Then the next day, it was Friday. The whole day they stayed in the deserts. Then in the afternoon they returned to their houses. Then the very morning on Saturday, Eritrean soldiers and the Ethiopian soldiers were going house to house, searching households. So this mother, an Eritrean soldier on Saturday came to the house and said, I want to search for guns, for yeah, stuff related to the Tigrayan special forces, to the militia. Where is your father? Where is your dad? Where is your brother? Blah blah. These questions are very common. We want to check. You are the family of a junta. Where are your family? Where are your male family members? So he kept searching, searching, searching. He found out nothing. Then finally, he pointed his gun on her. I kill you or you undress yourself. That was do it or I kill you. There is no one to help her. Imagine, out of her three kids, the 4 years old baby was just standing next to her. The other two, they fled and they were nowhere to be found. This 4 years old baby was, you can't figure out when babies are standing next to their moms, they catch the dress of their mothers and, they stand next to their mothers. That was how the baby was standing next to his mom. But this soldier was torturing the mom, pointing the gun on her forehead and ordering, undress yourself or I kill you. She was begging with God's name, please, with your mother, please, with your sisters, but he turned deaf ear. You are junta, you are wayana, you are trash, you are useless. You, Tigrayan woman, you betrayed the Ethiopian government. That was what he was saying. Imagine. You betrayed the Ethiopian government. So finally, just too graphic. I will not go to the details. He inserted foreign objects to her vagina and she started bleeding and bleeding and bleeding. And he was laughing as she was bleeding. Imagine the baby was standing there crying. He had no sympathy for at least for the baby. As she was bleeding, he was, joking. Oh, you were a virgin. Oh my goodness, that was what he was saying. It was not only this foreign object. He kept raping her for hours. Then the baby ran out of the house, went to neighbor's house, and told what he saw to the neighbors. He told them what happened to his mom. This is on Saturday. The next day, the same thing. Another Eritrean soldier came, entered. I have to search. I have to check. You are a family of junta. I have to search the house. He found nothing. And finally, the same thing, the same tactic. You have to remove your clothes. She was explained, please, yesterday your colleague did the same thing. I am in pain. Please, I am bleeding. Please turn a deaf ear. And that is something which needs to be underlined. Quote, I quote, you Tigrayan women and girls being raped by men is too much to you. You better be raped by machete. That was what he told her. So don't complain being raped by a man. I could have raped you by a machete, by a knife. I could have inserted a knife to your private part. So compare this statement with the statement Abiy Ahmed Ali said as a parliament. Abiy Ahmed Ali said the Tigrayan, he didn't say the Tigrayan. Those women were raped by men, whereas our soldiers were raped by machetes. That was what Abiy Ahmed said. So now compare with what this Eritrean soldier is saying to this helpless Tigrayan mother. So what I want to infer here is that what Abiy Ahmed Ali said in the parliament was an encouragement to every soldier, every invader. That was a green light to them, that they do as they wish with the mothers and sisters in Tigray. So that they did, because that was a green light to them. That's why I say this is a systemic one, a well-designed, a well-crafted by this genocidal and fascist Abiy Ahmed Ali of Ethiopia, so that he would crush, subjugate the people of Tigray, so that they would bow to his commands. They would obey whatever he orders them to do. So that he would handpick a mercenary leader, remote control leader, just like Abraham or Mulu, and send to Magala. So that that person would be remotely controlled from Arat Kilo, Addis Ababa, so that the people of Tigray would never say anything. They would say just, Your Highness, okay, as you wish. That was the intention, to crush, to exterminate the people, so that there would be no one to represent them politically, so that they would not be able to elect their representatives at regional as well as federal level, so that there would be no scholars coming out of Tigray to challenge at the federal level, so that the people of Tigray would always beg for food, nothing more than that. They would languish in an eternal poverty and wait for daily bread from Arat Kilo, and would never fight back to reclaim their rights, human rights, democratic rights from the hands of the fascists. And so they have to be crushed. The population have to be affected. the population has to be squashed number wise, psychological, or whatever way. And still in Northwestern, another teenager, she fled. Before I jump to that teenager, this mother, when she learned that her baby told neighbors, she decided to get lost from her house. So she left Shararo, she went all the way to Shira. She entered to an IDP. Unfortunately, she couldn't control her urine. She developed fistula. Because I mentioned earlier on, foreign objects were inserted into her private part by the Eritrean soldiers. So her reproductive organ was damaged. She even couldn't control her urine. So as the IDP, the challenge for her was that she was very, very, ashamed of herself. She was extremely stigmatized. So she decided to distance herself and isolate at one corner of Shira town. There was an abandoned, house. So she abandoned, or I mean, isolate herself and limited herself, confined in that remote place. When I asked her, why did you decide to be isolated in that area? And she told me, how can I stay in a place where 20 and more than people are sharing? Because I can't control my urine, I don't have money to buy these, hygiene materials. So how can I? So I had to just distance myself. Another teenager from northwestern Tigray, she fled to the deserts. She is an orphan. Of course, she was working at a private shop at Adnabrid, a town called Adnabrid. So she and another friend of hers, she's also a girl, they fled to the desert, the villages of Adi Nabrid. While they were in the village, the Eritrean soldiers captured them. There were also men with them. They separated the men. They took them to the bushes. No one knows what they did to them. Most probably they killed them. That's my imagination. Whereas they started gang raping to these two girls, 18 years old and second one is 20 years old. I was on the phone with the 18 years old victim. They gang raped them. Before gang raping, they tortured them. Where is your father, your brother? The same question. You junta, you wayane, you rubbish, you trash. Every, trash word that you might imagine that exists on the dictionary and doesn't exist, of course. After that, they gang raped them. Many soldiers, two teenagers, gang raped all of them. They dumped them there. Then these helpless girls, they had to, to travel from village to other village, other village. Then I asked her, did you get medical help? She replied, there was no health center. They ransacked every health center in Adnabrid, Shararo, and the neighboring towns. The Eritrean troops were transporting everything to Asmara, while the Ethiopian soldiers were watching this happen. Of course, they were also destroying households, gang raping mothers and girls. So it's a joint crime, a jointly engineered genocidal gang rape, genocidal destruction inflicted on every village and the town in Tigray. So these helpless girls, they stayed in the villages for 7 months. 7 months. They couldn't go to Shira, where there was a partial medical help, because there was no transportation, because the soldiers were everywhere between Adnabrid and Shira. So if they tried to go, this trauma was with them that they might be gang raped again and again. So they had to avoid every attempt. So they isolated in the villages of Adnabrid. After 7 months, they went to Shara. So when she arrived at the hospital, doctors tested her. The pregnancy was 7 months old, and she was extremely malnourished. So doctors told her, "You see, we can't undertake abortion. You are extremely malnourished. So, this surgery, or I mean, the abortion procedure would cause imminent danger on you. Very risky. So you better give birth to the baby." That was what they told her. And when I asked her, she's orphan, there is no one, no father, no mother, she's alone. And she was very concerned about, how am I going to give birth to the baby? I have nowhere to go. I have no shelter. I have no mother, no father, no family at all. What is going to be my destiny? That was her questions to me. So we found a good Samaritan who would, you know, monthly send money to her. And unfortunately, this genocidal fascist Abiy Ahmed Ali disrupted everything, switching off the telecom and the bank service in Tigray. At Shira town, 15 years old girl, she was gang raped by 3 Ethiopian soldiers. This was in November. I was on the phone with her mom because I couldn't speak with the 15 years old girl because she was traumatized. Her mom was on the phone with me. She explained everything to me. It was 5 between 5 to 6 p.m. in the afternoon. She sent her to buy something from a shop. As she was coming back to her home, these 3 Ethiopian soldiers abducted her. Imagine in her neighborhood, while household people were in the area were watching, they dragged her from the neighborhood. Then it got 6 p.m. That was the curfew time. No one would come out. They knew that, so they gang raped her, and they left her on the spot where they gang raped her. They dumped her, simply saying. But the neighborhood people were watching from behind closed doors. When the soldiers left her, they rushed out and carried her to her mom. When her mom took her the next day, because during the night they couldn't move because of the curfew. They had to wait till the next morning. When they arrived at the hospital in Shira, in the hospital there was no health professional. The health professionals were nowhere to be found because they were targeted. It was in November, during the very week when the invading forces occupied Shira. The hospital was only full of patients, no one, no health professional at all. So she lost hope there. She wandered from private clinic to another private clinic in the city. Luckily, she found one clinic giving service. So yeah, she got medicated. Another woman, a mother of two, they were many women fleeing from Shira towards Salahlaha, towards Aksum. As the invading forces were getting closer and closer to Shira, people were leaving the town and, you know, walking as far as they could. So these women, they thought, now we are in safe haven in the villages of Salahlaha. Unfortunately, these Eritrean soldiers overwhelmed the village where these women were taking refuge at. There was a woman, 62 years old woman with them. There was 8 months pregnant woman with them. There were teenagers, and this woman is, I have her age, 27 years old, 4 years old baby, 1 year and 6 months old baby. These are her two kids. So yeah, many of these women, and there were men as well. So they separated the men, they took them to another place, they divided the girls and the women among themselves. Imagine 62 years old woman is there. Imagine 8 months pregnant woman is there. They gang raped all of them, including the pregnant 8 months, just 1 month away from giving birth to the baby. All of them gang raped. This mother of two was on the phone with me out of this. She explained everything to me about what happened to them, the day, the situation. And I asked her what happened to the pregnant. She told me some days after the gang rape, the pregnancy was, it got, it went out, it got aborted naturally. You can imagine. That was how savage these invading forces have been. Another one in northern western. They were staying in their neighborhood. The Eritrean soldiers were going house to house. They are in their early 20s, these two, young ladies. The Eritrean soldiers, they entered the households, they searched everything, they found nothing. Then they started interrogating these two helpless young ladies. Tell us who is the member of the PLF. Tell us who is the member of the Tigrayan government leadership. Who is the militia? Who is the special force? Who is the most rich person in this neighborhood? Questions over questions. They replied they knew nothing. Then they abducted them. They drove them over 2 hours distance to the bushes. Over 2 hours. Speaking slurs, insults, painful words which I don't want to say here. All these 2 hours journey. Then once they took them to the forest, they tied their hands and their legs. They had with them chain, the chain that in the cities they tie very aggressive dog with chain. You might know chain,
Yeah,
this metallic chain.
yeah,
They had this chain. My question oftentimes is, why would they keep these chains, these wires with them? That's the question I had no answer for. So, or they were prepared what they were going to do, so they had, brought everything with them. So yeah, they tied their hands and their legs for 3 days and 3 nights, no water, no food, nothing at all. To make matters worse, they would imagine they are in the frost, but they will search areas where there are no shades, and they will put them during the daytime so that the sun will be on them, so that they will suffer from the overheat coming during the daytime. down from the sun. When they complain, please put us under the tree, they would insult them. You junta, you wayana, you rubbish, you trash, useless, shut up. And they will come and torture them on top of being overwhelmed by the heat. And there is no food, there is no water, I said, for 3 days, 3 nights. And there is gang rape. Gang rape. On the fourth day, they dumped them there while tied. They left them. They were called from a remote area. You have to come now, order from high chain, the military command. So they left them in the desert under the trees in the frost. Imagine, what if they would take them to the villages they took them from? This shows you how savage they are. Their intention to exterminate the Tigrayan people. The intention. So yeah, finally, she kind of crawled down the cliff and she was lucky. I'm surprised oftentimes that, no, I don't know, this is a miracle for me. They would find good Samaritans. There were Tigrayanis hiding in the trees. So they untied her, they carried her all the way back to the village. Unfortunately, the second helpless lady, this girl didn't know what happened to her because they kept them apart, at least 100 meters away. Because during that day, they will tie them to the trees, they will go to the villages to continue their barbaric actions. Then they will come in the evening, then do the gang rape. That was the routine for 3 days. So that in order for these two helpless girls not to help each other, they would keep them 100 meters away and tie them to the bushes, hands and legs. That was when they were in such a distance that they left them. So this girl didn't know what happened to the second girl. When I came to central Tigray, this mother was being tortured by the Ethiopian soldiers. There were 5 of them. I don't want to mention the specific place. It's just in central Tigray. So she was saying, حممت إيه بجهم قدفوني حممت إيه بجهم محاروني. I'm sick, please spare me. As she was begging, what they answered will shock you. They told her, oh, we have HIV. We are patients ourselves. We'll infect you with our diseases. Don't be bothered with your disease. Word by word. After some weeks, when she went to a hospital in Abiy Adi, the medical doctor asked her, and this was the story she told him. This is the story I received from the medical doctor directly. And still from another village in central Tigray, the Eritrean soldiers were torturing a mother, and there was a 4 years old baby girl. She was crying as the Eritrean soldiers were gang raping her mother. Please leave her alone. Adde Hidogua, please leave my mom. Leave my mom. As she was crying, one of the Eritrean soldiers, this will shock everyone. He pulled his blade, llama, and cut her tongue. He didn't completely cut, but he cut halfway. So now this helpless, innocent girl cannot drink, cannot eat because her tongue is halfway cut, so she lives the damaged part outside. She cannot pull it in. Finally, she was taken to hospital. She was lucky MSF was giving service in that area. So this specialist surgeon, of course, there was a Japanese surgeon among the MSF. He, helped, fixed the tongue. Of course, it would take her weeks before it fully recovers. But her mom was gang raped in front of this helpless kid. When I come to Eastern Tigray, this mother of three was at her home. It was 5 p.m. in the evening. It is actually in Woro town. So these soldiers, they are Ethiopian soldiers. They were five of them. The fifth one was keeping the gate. Four of them entered the room because there was curfew. The mother kept her kids with her because it was evening time. Then the soldiers gang raped her in front of three of her kids. In front of three of them. I had my contact in Woro, a woman. I begged her to get me connected with victims. She promised it, so she went all the way to this victim's house and she replied, "Oh, Gabriel, you know, the woman, she is in front of me. Unfortunately, she doesn't want to speak. But what if we send you money so that you take her to Ida to get medical help? Can you ask her, please?" She replied, "No, I would go nowhere. I better stay here at my home. I would never go anywhere." That was her response. Another at Woro, I had a good friend of mine, yeah, my junior at the university I studied. He was from Woro, and he was at the very, you know, shelling. When the shelling took place in Woro, he was there. He was at the receiving end of every barbarity of the joint force of Ethiopia and Eritrea. So the soldiers were going house house, raping these women in front of their husbands, pregnant women, sisters, wives in front of their husbands, and finally they entered this Catholic mission camp. In the camp, it was the Ethiopian soldiers. They started gang raping these teenagers, 14 years old teenager girls. And that was not their only barbarism. They started gang raping these nuns, the Catholic sisters, the virgins who now dedicated their entire life to God, prayer, spirituality. Gang raped them. So one of them, he told me, she is at least 7 years old. She was very strong, brave enough. She called Tigrayan users who would be able to record her on camera, on video. I have no words how to appreciate this brave mother. She told them, record me. I would love the world to know my testimony. And they were very concerned. But you are on camera. How can you cover your face? No, I don't want my face to be covered. So they recorded her. She told them everything the barbaric Ethiopian soldiers did. It is too graphic to speak what they did to them. It is not, uh, proper for me to speak everything as it is here in the media. This and when we go to the southern Tigray, in the village, it was Ethiopian soldiers. There was a woman with her kids. So they entered the household and they gang raped her. So she didn't know. She was very stigmatized, and after some weeks, she went to Quiha hospital. At Quiha, it was a medical doctor who was telling me the story, her story. So they tested her. and they found out that she was pregnant. They removed the pregnancy, and after months, she had an appointment. When she came back, checked her, found out that she was HIV positive. So they infected her with HIV/AIDS. And another young girl, she's from my Sabri, the Amhara Fano entered the house. There was her mom, but in front of her mom, the Amhara Fano gang raped this young lady. After that, she went to hospital. They rejected her medical service because she's Tigrayan. And the hospital in Mysore was overwhelmed by the Amharas. As she was speaking to her friend, another lady in one town, Amharan town, that girl was very broken. She recommended her to visit her. She went all the way. When she was checked, she was pregnant. It was after months. And for the abortion, she was asked very expensive money. It was private clinic. And the reason that she said broke my heart. She told them, I am gang raped, so please abort my pregnancy. Who gang raped you? And she told them I was raped by family members. If she would say I was raped by the Fano, you can imagine she would be killed. So she had to change things. She said raped by family members. And she hid her identity. She claims that she is an Amhara, ethnic Amhara. So that shouldn't be, denied of medical help. These two things. I'm an ethnic Amhara. I was gang raped by family members. Then they aborted the pregnancy. The money, my friend who lives here in Sweden sent her money for the abortion. There are many testimonies, but for time being, let me limit here. And of course, the recent testimonies which I put on tigrayrevictims.org, two special editions, and one of them was raped in across the Takaza. She was fleeing from Shira to Sudan, gang raped by the Amhara special forces, and another one from originally from Maikara, she was gang raped at Humara, and that one at a church, and this one at a checkpoint. Something in common, Amhara special forces in gang, and the same thing in common, we want to cleanse your womb from the Tigrayan identity, from the Tigrayan blood. We want your wombs to produce Amhara babies. We don't want Tigrayan babies, Amhara babies. We rape you or we kill you. And even the one from Shira, the contact numbers of her entire family was taken. Her smartphone was taken, and they vowed to kill all of her family members in Shira if she happens to utter a single word to anyone. And when she arrived at Sudan refugee camp, she didn't go to clinic for almost a year until up before a week. And when I asked her, why didn't you go to a clinic? She said, if I go to a clinic, the health professional would share my story to other people, so my story would go viral, and the Amhara special force would come to know, then they would tell their colleague in Shira or wherever, then my family will be in danger. And the second one was raped at a church in Humara. I asked the same question. I asked her, and she replied, there is social stigma here. People are just, pointing fingers on the victims. So I didn't want to face that kind of stigma and discrimination. So I just kept it to myself. So yeah, this is just some. I would say, the tip of the iceberg as far as the testimonies is concerned.
Hmm. It's a very agonizing and painful account of real woman facing real but unspeakable, really unspeakable pain, both physically and mentally, psychologically. And the idea, as has been highlighted in many of the headlines by international media, has been to degrade them, to not only them kneel down and bow down, but also for the so as painful as it should be heard, that shouldn't be silenced, that should be encouraged. And you are with your team in listening, in contacting, and sharing their stories. And I thank you very much for that. And I'm terribly sorry that these important stories that should be out, that should be heard, facing the difficulties. And I really hope that it didn't block a significant part of the information. I know in what I was trying to ask, and I hope the stories you shared from Western Tigray to Central Tigray to Eastern and Southern Tigray, this is only, like you mentioned, like you rightly put, only, only a very small part of the tip of the iceberg. For those who uh, want to learn more, what you are seeing in front of you is the Rescue Tigran Rape Victims website that I shared earlier. It's Tigray with Y, rapevictims.org. And there you'll find updates from the team, Gabra Meskel, on agonies, rape as a tool to raise the Tigrayan identity. You have uh, day stamped accounts that you can see there, and stories, campaigns, and voicing for the voiceless, real voiceless, for a number of unspeakable reasons. Again, that has been imposed on them and the whole millions of Tigrayans in Tigray. Just last word. Again, I don't trust what is seems to be a very, very poor connection, but what would be the last word you want to share with the audience, Gabra Mescal?
My last word is um, this as Professor Mukesh Kapila would rightfully say, I quote, the hallmark of the Tigray genocide is the weaponized rape. And that's right. I was going back in history to check what unfolded in the genocides that we know, the Rwanda genocide and the Darfur and the newer genocide, of course, in South Sudan, the DRC, the Rohingya in Myanmar, and the Uyghur ethnic minority, Muslim minority in China, and the Bosnia war. So there is something in common in all of these, and that is in the Rohingya of Myanmar, the Uyghur of China, the Muslim minors in China, and the Bosnian Muslim women, these were during the war or the genocide in these communities, they were targeted because of their religion. They are Muslims, and their religion was taken as a reason for them to be targeted. Whereas in South Sudan and Darfur, in Rwanda, and in Congo, and of course the recent one in our case in Tigray, the women and girls have been targeted because of their ethnic background, because they are ethnically minorities in the countries that they reside in. So now the weaponized rape waged on us is not something minor. It is at the core of the Tigray genocide. We have to, you know, picture it in a proper way. It is at the base of the Tigray genocide. If the woman in a given society is broken, then the whole society is broken, no question. Those victims have children to take care of. They have families to take care of. So imagine the social stigma, the STDIs, HIV, the unwanted pregnancy, the psychological trauma, the physical trauma, and of course, this permanent reproductive organ destruction. Because some of them they are paralyzed, they can't be able to give birth to children in the future. So that is an agony that we will struggle to come out in the future. That's something very heavy burden ahead of us. So we need to figure out how to heal ourselves, because we as well are victims. We are traumatized psychologically because our moms and sisters are suffering. So we have to figure out as a society what should we do. The first thing is what should we do to break the stigma. And I'm sorry to say that there are husbands who say, I don't want to see you. You are not my wife anymore. To those victims. Whether we like it or not, we'll come to know many husbands saying the same stuff, that they will dismiss their wives. So we need to figure out how to, to win over this social stigma. How should we break? How should we encourage the husband, the family, to be very generous and kind enough to take care of these victims. So that is one thing. We need as community be very uh, kind, generous, and welcoming to them. We need to encourage them. We need to empower them. We need to give them hope that it's not their fault. It is, it shows them the degree of in savagery of the perpetrators, not the victims. So we need to convince them that it is not your mistake. Your life is not, you know, uh, it is not decided by this incident. You are beyond that. Your destiny is at your hand. So we have, to encourage them and to help them visit medical centers. And finally, we need to figure out how to uh, have centers where the victims would be sheltered at, would get psychological therapy, physical treatment, they would heal, they would gain skills, different kinds of skills which can help them earn money so that they can help themselves, their children, and of course they can contribute to the society positively. So we have a big homework at hand. It is not Mr. X, Mr. Y, or the victim's own issue. It is the issue of the whole people of Tigray. So we need to think at personal level how to make them recover from this misfortune. This is my final word. Thank you, Gage. Arizer, you are mute, Gage. You are muted.
I should be back soon. Still, there is a delay in the response of this, and uh, am I back now? Am I back?
Yeah, you are back.
Okay, great. Yeah, so thank you so much for
I think your connection is lost. So yeah, there is tigrayandrapevictims.org. So I I beg everyone, every audience right here to visit tigrayandrapevictims.org at least once a day and tweet readily available messages and for the sake of the uh, Tigrayan victims. So please have a look at the website on a daily basis. So yeah, I was just taking
yeah,
advantage of your
I know. Thank you so much for covering for me and going through, despite the difficulties we have had on the technical side. So TigrayRapVictims.org is the one that you see on the screen. There you have every contact information as well on social media, from Twitter to Instagram and Facebook. And you can reach out to the team and Gabriel. Uh, I'm so sorry for our viewers that we have had this technical difficulty, and for I'm sorry, I apologize, Gabriel Meskel, as well. Bringing you here was meant for the viewers, the audience, to hear firsthand from you on what has been going through in Tigray, but also other chronicle of this agony, this human suffering that is unspeakable, to for them to hear from you and hopefully add to the voices of these voiceless women for the world to act. But what we can say for sure is, given the amount of reporting that has been going on and great works of people like you, uh, like Samantha Power said, the world can never say it didn't know. What we can say is I close today's show, and I hope we'll have another opportunity to voice and to bring you back and hear the stories, and hopefully the remedies, the way out of this nightmare that has been on Tigray for the last year. Thank you for your time, Gabriel Mescal, and good night.
Thank you so much for having me, Gage. Good night.
You have been following, despite the technical difficulties and disconnections that happened a number of times. I apologize for that again. The show with Gabra Mescal, Gabra Mariam from Sweden. who had to discontinue his graduate studies in order to focus on voicing for the voiceless rape survivors, rape victims of girls and women of Tigray, as young as 4 to 5 years old and as old as close to 90 years old, under Eritrean and Ethiopian forces that have been acting savagely on girls and women in Tigray. This is your host, Getachew Safa, as we sign off. Bye for now.